What's
everybody's walking
the
together.
grossest hotel you've ever stayed at?
I got that asked to me.
I just asked you.
No, not before. From going from that to that,
Right.
it's just not that exciting. But I know no one's really gonna read that much. You guys are creatives, and I think people who like are, or at least like intellectual, like they have those kind of thoughts. But I think there's people who just like are okay with the rat race, like okay with the usual. Like they're actually one of the biggest like change in music for me. Oh, mug down.
It's big small talks. It's big small talk.
So, when somebody reads it, like one of my best friends, I remember he read a script one time and he ripped me apart. Like I wrote this horror script years ago about something that went down. Long story about there, but anyway. And he goes, and he reads the whole thing and he calls me. He goes, "What the F is wrong with you?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "This script is fantastic, and then that last page, that ending was crap. How dare you?" He goes, "As a horror fan, this is insulting. Like, who told you to do this? Because I've never told you to write something like this. Like, this is crap. Like, why would you even go that route?" And it was one of those things where I'm like, he was right. Like, at the end of the day, like I reread it, I'm like, well, he's right. Like, that's stupid. And yes, that was only one page, but still, at the end of the day, like he loved it so much that one piece didn't work for him that he was furious.
I mean, at least he was passionate about it.
Of course, but
that's
you're
like,
inspiring
okay, cool,
too.
he's in it. Yeah, right.
Or I'm like, okay, he got into this.
Isn't that common though with horror films? I mean, there's
a lot of horror films with ending
the movie will be super, super good, and then you're just like, it just ends. Have you seen Squid Game yet?
I have not.
Have you seen it?
So good.
I won't. I don't want to give it away, but just for how good it was to me personally, the ending was just like, what? Like you go through this kind of journey thing, and I don't know.
It was okay.
You did?
I got what they were doing.
You did?
I've seen way worse horror movies.
Well, but
they have like just a whole like one for me like. I thought the Purge concept when it first came out was like, dude, this concept's crazy.
The first one.
Yeah.
The first one was...
And I feel like that's with all the Purge movies. I feel like execution's always just horrible for me. But like the... But yeah, I remember, I think, is it the first one where they're just like sitting at a table and like it just to end the Purge?
That's the one that's with Ethan Hawke, right?
Yeah. And I'm like... This is what we're doing?
Yeah, that's
this
how you
the
end
ending
it?
is we're just sitting at a table.
Well, horror is different because they go for ambiguity. They try and go for the scare. Like sometimes it's the final jump scare before the credits, which it's very 80s and we get it.
Right.
But like also you have the ambiguity of like what happened. We're leaving you in the dark. And
Right.
That's okay.
yeah.
But then there's also like the realistic part of things where like, you don't always get a happy ending, and that's cool too.
Yeah, I actually like
I would like that more often in horror films where it's like, oh, like that's crazy. Like that's definitely not the happy ending.
Squid Game ends in kind of ambiguity a little bit because you're like, oh, what is he about
Does
to
it
do?
leave it open for like a second season, or is it just
it
like
definitely does that.
Okay.
It definitely does that. But and I'm not disagreeing that that's not what they should have done, right? Like if that's what they wanted to do, then do that. However, you had this really good show, and then it just seemed lazy.
Oh,
you know what I'm saying?
No, I know
okay.
those. There's
You know
a
what I'm
difference between laziness and ambiguity,
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
And I get into this with one of my best friends is a film critic, and we get into this all the time because he's like he loves ambiguity, and I respect ambiguity, but there is a difference between telling a story to completion, and there's a difference between telling a story and being like, "Ooh, I'm just going to let you." Guess what the ending should be. It's like, no, do your effing job and finish the story.
Yeah. Right.
Like,
exactly.
That's not
or even
open to metaphor.
Or even leave it, if you wanted it to be ambiguous, leave it like with 3 options. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, because then there's like, oh, like they're thinking, it either could have been this, or this.
Exactly.
And it's like, well, this is why it would be this. No. And then you can have the whole audience kind of discuss it. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it leaves it open for that narrative of what it could have been. This is why, I mean, one of my favorite shows of all time is How I Met Your Mother. And that ending is something that people either love or hate. But love it or hate it, people are still talking about that ending today.
Yeah.
And that's the idea of it's like, those characters grew out of it, but at the end of the day, like we're all still talking about it because of how much of it we either liked or didn't like, or what it meant and didn't mean. Like
and okay, so I love that show too, and I use like that's one of the shows that I'll like rewatch. It's not on Netflix anymore, but
Hulu and Amazon Prime.
Okay,
Yep.
Oh, good to know. But like I would literally like watch that show like over and over again. Like I pretty much like wouldn't stop watching that show because like I would just fall asleep to it because it just made me happy to like end my night that way. Just put it on. It's an easy watch. There'd be some episodes where like I'd want to watch the whole thing. There would be some where I'd be able to fall asleep to and stuff. And for me, I just like for that show to end the way it did, I don't really understand how they could have done it any other way without I don't think it could have worked any other way.
Are you saying like him ending up with the mom was too easy?
No, like no. Like I think that the way they did it was like with him having like a separate mom that was not Robin, and then it being like, oh, like get them together at the very end there. It's like, okay, like cool. Like I think that was like a decent way because everybody wanted him to get together with Robin, right? Like that was like the whole like thing.
They did, and the idea is that Carter Bays and Craig Thomas knew, like the creators knew right away, like
they wanted that.
We're writing this because he's telling the story because the mom died.
Yeah,
he's telling his kids, and that was their whole thing, and that's why in first season, like they thought they was going to get canceled, and Victoria was going to be the mom, and then they thought we were going to get canceled season 3, and why did Chalk's character, Emily Chalk's character. I can't think of her name. Stella.
Yeah.
Stella.
There you go.
She was going to be the mom, which, by the way, Britney Spears saved How I Met Your Mother. Quick
hilarious.
Note. When Britney Spears wanted to guest star on it, the
she
ratings
got a bunch
shot
of ratings,
through the roof.
right?
It was on the verge of being canceled. They were actually like, "This your last season."
Really?
Stella was going to be the mom. That little like ring that he gave her at the end of season 3, that was going to be it. And Britney Spears' ratings saved the show.
What an interesting concept to have like a show where they're writing it as it's going along. And correct me if I'm like just ignorant, but does that happen frequently where it's like they're pretty much writing it as it goes along to where it's like, well, it might get canceled or we might get like picked up for another season?
So that's network TV. Network TV is very different because you do approach it with like, this is what we want to do with the season as your overall arc, right? And this is how we're going to go about it. And you either know, like with networks, they're going to be like, okay, well, you have 13 episodes this season. So that's your season, which a normal network season, depending on the show, is about 22 to 24 episodes. So if you get 13 episodes, that's what you have to work with. And so the first 6 episodes are what they planned on. And then the next 6 or 7 are going to be kind of filler and let's try and fit in as much story that we're not going to get to. And then by about the 7 or 8 episode mark, you'll find out if you're going to get ordered for another 7 episodes to finish out the season. Then it's like, okay, now we can like, really lay this out and really go for it. And How I Met Your Mother for the first 3 seasons was like that, and it was very back and forth.
You can't plan 10 seasons if you're
exactly
not right.
So after with the whole Stella thing, once Britney Spears came on and all that, and that shot it through the roof. So once season 3 ended, they were like, "Okay, you're renewed for another 2 seasons. You're renewed for another 2 seasons," and it kept going. Okay. And the only reason why I think the people dislike that ending so much is because of how season 9 played out, and part of that is because Jason, who plays Marshall, Jason Segel didn't want to come back.
That was going to say,
that was like an 11th hour decision, and so they wrote the season without him in it. They were going to go through with it without Marshall there, and then he decided to. That's why they have the whole thing with
Marshall
him
versus the machine,
and
all by
all
himself,
that, right? Because it was filmed all separately.
Nice.
And I think that's the biggest problem that most people have is the execution. It's just like you guys spend like 22 episodes on one weekend of Barney and Robin's wedding, and then 20 minutes into the finale, they divorce. Like, that could have been written, executed much better. Yeah. But I mean,
but and it's like from an outsider's perspective, you can have all that criticism all you want, but when you're in the writer's room and you're like, you don't know if you're going to even have a season this year, you don't know who's coming back. Like, it's like,
it is. And there's a lot of variables to work with too. Sure. And with How I Met Your Mother, I don't think that Carter Bays and Craig Thomas, I think they wanted to, that was their original ending, was that Ted was going to end up with Rob, and that's what they wanted. And I think the characters really did grow out of that. And I mean, you're right in what you said earlier. Like, there isn't really an ending there. Like, even if the show ends with Ted saying, "And that kid is how I met your mother," and then the show ends, which so many people said that's how it should have ended. It's like, no, that's expected.
Yeah, that would have been really expected. That
and it would have been like, okay.
Cop-out. Yeah.
And people, I think, would have been even more angry about that.
I guess it's more surprising, whether you liked it or not, the surprising part of it, like that wow factor of like, oh wait, like he's actually going to go get Robin or something like that. Like that's what sticks with you.
Oh, completely. Yeah. And he shows up with the blue French horn, and you're kind of like, okay, this makes sense now.
Yeah,
like,
right. I mean,
it's too little too late, but like everybody got their happy ending. Like Ted got his mom, he got his kids that Robin never wanted, and like Robin didn't want kids. She got to travel the world. She finally settled down. Ted lost the mom and has given it just enough time. So like, they get their happy ending.
Yeah, everybody does. And the kids wanted him to go get Robin. They literally like go get Robin. It's like,
and so even Barney like always wanted something to make him feel like a family. Like after what his dad did to him, and what happens, he gets a freaking daughter. Like the one thing to teach him to not be what he always was.
Yeah.
Well, damn, all right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I really like that show.
But it's one of my favorites for a reason.
I really
to me,
like that show.
it's. I know everybody compares it to Friends because there wouldn't be a How I Met Your Mother without Friends, and I love Friends. Don't get me wrong, but How I Met Your Mother did everything right that Friends did wrong. Like that's why I think that it's just a better show. Because
do you think that you have a bias of that because of your upbringing with How I Met Your Mother and not with Friends? Or would you say that you were kind of? Did you watch Friends when it was coming out and stuff?
No,
No.
off and on. I was
Yeah.
never like a diehard Friends fan.
Okay.
It was off and on. I actually didn't binge Friends for the first time till like 6 years ago, and they put it on Netflix, I think, and then I just went like, okay, I'm
that's
gonna
where
go for this.
Yeah,
That's
same.
where I did it too.
Same.
Yeah.
And
That's-
look,
It's good.
yeah,
it is good.
There's a lot of things they do well, like writing wise. The thing with Friends that was really weird is that they did a lot of things that are great and innovative, and then they did a lot of terrible things too. But what as the show progressed, they started listening to the fans and like, oh, what do you think the fans would want? Let's go with the fans, and that's cool and all, but like look what happened with Game of Thrones for doing that. Like, it's the idea.
Okay,
of the,
so when you were talking, sorry, don't interrupt, but when you were talking about a show you liked with the ending, I thought you were going to bring up Game of Thrones.
okay,
That's where you're going to go.
I have to use the restroom.
Yeah,
real quick.
do your
I want to
thing.
talk about Game of Thrones.
Do your
real
thing.
quick.
Okay, all right,
Pause.
we'll pause it. All right. So,
Okay, wait. So before we all took a pee break, we were talking about How I Met Your Mother, Friends, and the things that Friends did wrong. And once we got into that things that Friends did
and
wrong, we were
poor
getting
endings. Poor
yeah,
endings.
Yeah,
is
we
where
were
got to
talking
Game
about
of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
Because that's where I thought he was going to go when he said
Did you?
talking about endings and a show he really liked. Because I know him and I have talked a little bit about Game of Thrones, and I don't know.
Well,
you
Game
said
of
you have
Thrones.
things.
What the thing was there is that they didn't have the source material. I get it. George R. R. Martin has been writing those books forever, and he's gotten off on all, which I get.
I
Like,
didn't realize the first book was like 1994.
94, 95, yeah.
Yeah, like that's like an old story. I was
Oh,
like,
yeah, Game of Thrones. I mean, he wrote the first, I think, 4 books in like the first like 7 or 8 years, and then it's
now
been,
it's just been.
yeah.
I have a theory that he's actually like unsure of it almost. The fact that like he wants HBO to execute it and then see how the reception is and then do it.
Well,
That's
see,
like
it's
a
funny you
little
say
theory.
that because he's come out and said that what the stories he has left, HBO could have done 10 seasons of Game of Thrones, and it wouldn't even have told the whole story because Bran. Oh, can we say spoilers here?
Yeah, spoilers.
Yeah.
Bran ending up on the throne, he said that wasn't even the end of the story. Like to him, like he said, I have another 3 seasons, and the only reason why we're still not getting more Game of Thrones now, besides of course the prequel, is because the creators got their Star Wars trilogy and said, "Peace, like
Yeah,
we don't
right.
want to do this. This is why we're going to do a crappy send off," and then they lost it because Kathleen Kennedy sucks and they have creative differences. Sorry, not trying to be rude, but Kathleen Kennedy really does suck. Like she is just tearing Star Wars apart. That's a whole nother. But anyway.
Wait,
So,
is that the creative director for Star Wars right
yeah,
now?
she worked with Lucasfilm for years with George Lucas, and when it got sold to Disney, she kind of like was part of the transition of bringing it over, and which is great. Like she helped shelter in Force Awakens and Rogue One. She did some good things in the beginning, and then she just started making creative decisions that just took the whole series. And I'm not even going to say in a politically correct way, just in a way that just. It was away from the fan base that helped build it, and
Yeah.
she wanted her own agenda put in there, and then she wanted to do things like have her voice heard instead of like listening to reason, like what happened with Mandalorian, and the firing of Gina Carano, like that was all her. It's just like somebody's
Interesting.
political views should not like she's great in the show, just let it go.
Right.
And it's Kathleen Kennedy just being. I won't say.
Well,
names,
the direction
I
of the,
get what you're saying,
the
though,
direction of Star Wars is definitely taking a turn for me. It's
It
like,
has.
for the
It's,
worse.
and it's tragic because, and I mean, Kathleen Kennedy, like with the new trilogy, right? They bring on J.J. Abrams to direct Force Awakens, and that's the safe thing to do. I get it. Like everybody can complain about that one, but at the end of the day, they wanted to bring on the old fans and the new fans.
I still think it's one of the better,
It
probably the
is.
best of the trilogy.
It is because they went the safe route of like, we're going to get this person and we're going to have the story that's very much like A New Hope. And Kathleen Kennedy knew J.J. Abrams wasn't going to direct the next 2, but he had a story written out for the 2 after that. And Kathleen Kennedy was just, she was like, okay, well, you're not going to direct the next 2. Okay. And then Force Awakens comes out, it's big. And then she goes, all right, JJ, come back for the next one. He goes, no, I wasn't joking. Like, I'm not. So then she brings on Ryan Johnson, which isn't a great director, but Ryan Johnson says like, okay, what can I not do? And instead of Kathleen Kennedy saying, well, this is what me and JJ agreed to write for the whole arc, and this is what we're going to go with, she went, do whatever you want. And he goes on and goes, okay,
I
cool.
actually like his version and like what he wanted to do with Star Wars. I actually thought it was like a refreshing take on Star Wars.
It was refreshing, just not as part of a saga that is already mapped out. And
Yeah,
that's where it went a bit.
I've listened to like some podcasts about it where they're like, he's starting off this whole thing of like anybody could be a Jedi. It's like we're getting rid of the old guard. It's these newcomers, and then the next movie is just like, oh no, it's been Palpatine the whole time.
No, you're right. And the whole anything could be a Jedi. Like that's why Rey's whole backstory, like they had it was already established that she was going to be a Palpatine, which cool, whatever. But had they gone with anything could be a Jedi, that'd be cool because it's just like, oh, this isn't just like.
Yeah.
It isn't just a
It's not the
freaking
Skywalker
Skywalker
stuff.
thing.
Yeah.
This is for everybody.
Yeah.
That's so
'Cause Star
cool
Wars
that
is so much
anybody
bigger
can have the
than that.
Force. Yeah. And Rey was a great character to launch that with, and then it just
Yeah.
She just, and then you watch Rise of Skywalker and you're just like in tears.
It's so
not
bad.
happy tears because it's so bad, man.
I think the best one they've done recently was Rogue One. I think
Rogue One
that's
is
the best
so.
one.
Like when I was watching that in theaters the first time, and that bomb's come at them, and I went, "Why aren't they escaping? They're not." And then you read the realization of
Everyone's
not
gonna die.
They're gonna die. That's right. Like
Spoilers if you haven't seen it, but
yeah,
you should,
sorry,
you
guys.
should have seen it by
But
now.
that's the part where you just kind of look at it and you go, "Wait, why haven't I heard about these characters beyond this?" Oh, and that sacrifice, and you're like, "Oh man, this is effed up."
Yeah.
It's one of those endings like you were saying though. It's like the happy ending doesn't happen, and
Yeah.
it's like that. It just makes for a better film, because sometimes there just has to be like a clean cut, like like that's the end. There's no more to this story. Like you know what I'm saying?
I love an unhappy ending.
Well, the
favorite.
one that we have out right now, the feature I wrote that we're trying to get, that they were looking for directors for, like that's the biggest attraction to it, is that it's not like this, oh, everybody gets what they want in the end. Like it's a bleak ending because that's life. Like as much as that sucks, we all want that happy ending, but like life can be bleak and you don't get what you want. 90% of the time you don't.
Yeah.
And it's that 10% of the time that is what you work for, sure, but like and that's what's kind of fascinating. That's why we talk about La La Land all the time. Just because
I was just gonna say that. Yeah.
I love that movie for that reason, because the
100%.
last 5 minutes of that movie just makes you go, oh wait, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean? And it's fascinating, but it's also heartbreaking because it's like,
Or like
Yeah, that's
500 Days
life.
of Summer.
Oh,
yeah.
Like that one, you're just like, ooh, that one like just hits home. You know
that
what
one
I'm
though
saying?
is intriguing because you watch it and music and choices aside, which is great.
Yeah.
You after that first watching it again is even more heartbreaking because you see the signs.
Yeah.
It's very clear
it's
that they
not
are
gonna
not
work
on the same page
Yeah.
emotionally,
Yeah.
and he just totally thinks they are, and it's
Yep.
like, oh, dude.
Well,
Yep.
and it's like we've all been there. You know what I
of
mean? We've all
course.
been there where like you thought something was there and it's not, and then you go back to it and you're like,
Yeah, and it's just that
That's
one.
what that
and sometimes
was.
it's as little as that one time you had that interaction. Somebody said something, you went, "Wow, how'd I picked up on that?"
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
this,
yeah.
I could have saved a lot of heartbreak. but-
Right. Yeah.
It's big small talks. It's big small talk.